The deeper I go, the deeper it gets. We're down into the nuclear core. This is Roger, Mud Fossil University. And it doesn't get any deeper than this. We're talking about resonance. Oh, resonance. Everybody thinks they understand it. Say, well, what is resonance? Say what it says here, an object free to vibrate, like that in a wave, tends to do so at a specific rate called the object's natural or resonant frequency. So some things wave this long, some go like this fast, some go faster, some go slow. So if something in your area is vibrating at the same rate that you want to vibrate at, you will pick that vibration up if you're in the same physical system, and you will start to shake and vibrate at the same vibration the other one does. Now, so why does that happen? What sets up that natural resonance? That's the key. How does that happen? So let's talk about the real part, because they go right on from that. The resonance, comparatively weak vibration in one object can cause a strong vibration in another. What sets up that vibration, the resonance? Why does it want to vibrate at that specific frequency? All right? And it's because of the molecular attachments. And the way they bond together sets up a fabric. And some fabric flap woof, woof, and some flap woof, and that's the way it works. That's what frequency is. That's what resonance is. And I'm going to show you resonance and the rule of 8. All right? Now, this is important. I didn't want to get so deep into this, but it's not really that deep when you start looking at it. I don't think I've asked you to think of anything that your mind's not capable of. So far, if you have a problem, go back and start over and listen to it, because there's nothing I said that is complicated, and there is nothing I will say that's complicated, because the whole thing is uncomplicated. As soon as you realize that light can be accelerated, there are no neutrons, the electron flood happens to the core of the protons. They literally attach to the core, and you have a negative and positive core until it exceeds the ability for more negatives to come in and attach. Then they still want to come in, and then they end up in their orbitals. And I can show you that in a toy. This is Latham's Crazy Machines. It's literally a toy. And they go ahead and they take and they construct the literal same thing that you have in an atom. That's the core. There's positive, and it's crushed in with the negatives until there's so many negatives that the positive they exceed the positive. So what happens when more want to come in? They say, no, you have to stay out here. And that's what's going to happen. You watch what happens. I'll explain it as it goes along. It's very simple. All right, he's going to come, boom, there it is. That's what happens in quantum physics. That's what happens in the core attached to the electrons. They sit in between regions which are created and designated by the structure of the core. Now, there's a rule of 8. I can't totally understand it yet, but there'll be 8 regions around once you get past the simplest core. Now, watch what happens. This is attached by pull. It wants to get there, but this says, no, I have enough. That's exactly what happens in the atomic cores. Now, additional ones will come, and that will push the additional one exactly a distance away, and another one, and another one, and another one, and they will attract as many as this has a propensity to pull in. As simple as that. Now, then it gets a lot deeper, because we go on with what creates anti-gravity and what creates light and what creates heat and all this stuff. But I'll sort of explain it right now. Heat will be when he shakes this thing, and it'll be shaking in here like crazy. That's the heat, because this is going to try to push into another guy's region, and he will push back and it will shake him. That's what heat is. then light will be where it shakes so bad and everybody's pushing so hard that one goes flying off. So here goes. Right now, he's shaking it. That's heat. It's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, and it's shaking and shaking. And all of a sudden, it will take off, and it will go flying away, and that is called light. And there it goes. Boom. He's going to say, boom, get away from me, get away. Ah, fighting, fighting. Boom, there it goes. That was light. So heat and light, the nuclear core, it's positives and negatives everywhere. All right, this is the rule of 8, the octet rule, that some people call it. And it's a chemical rule of thumb, reflects observation that atoms of main group elements tend to combine in such a way that each atom has 8 electrons in the valence shell. Valence shell is your external shell, giving it the same electron configuration as a noble gas. Now, let's look at this in its reality, because these are the Lewis diagrams. They show how they bond together and hold each other and so forth. Now, these are, and they say especially applicable in carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. These are these are life things. Now, let's look at it in its practicality, because it's actually observed in this demonstration I'll show you. All right, this is on YouTube, and it's Amazing Resonance Experiment, and it is amazing. All right, now this is by Brushpup. All right, here goes. Nikola Tesla said it best. You want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. That guy was a hero. Now, here we go. They're going to show what happens when they put things on this tone generator, which is nothing more than a vibrator. Anyway, they start out at this 100 hertz. All right, now, salt is on there. Now, I got to be honest with you. I'm not sure whether the salt is required, because it's an extremely polar molecule, sodium chloride, NaCl, highly positive and negative, and either one of them will kill you, but together they taste pretty good. Now, here goes. I got a funny story about that. I should tell that story. I'll tell you later sometime. All right, here goes. There's the salt. Now, metal plate is going to vibrate. The pitch tone increases, the patterns get more complex. Now, I claim that as they start to shake this pattern, all right, now we're looking at resonance frequencies. As this sets up, this is the most basic, like helium and hydrogen setup, where you have only the single lowest orbital, and we're very low in the frequencies. Now, that frequency means it's like a wave that comes out, and it's pushing these, making these walls. That's all I can say. That's what happens here. Now, as these frequencies get more, you're going to start to see 8 of them. In the beginning, there's no 8, because there's just not enough territory being covered to get the 8. Now, here goes. At 345, you get this. Now, I say that's really, really nice and clean. Now we go starting to get into the 8 phase. And look, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's the 8 around there. Now we're getting into orbitals of electrons that hold out. Now you get into 1820, and you're getting your 8 out there. If you look around, you're going to be able to count 8 of them. All right? All right, now there's going to be another 8 coming around here. And then it just keeps getting more and more complex, locking in at frequencies. So I started thinking to myself, well, I'm seeing they have to get at an exact frequency, saying you push away from me and I'll push away from you, and you push away from me and I'll push away from you, and everybody keeps their own distance. That's what it's all about. Stay away from me, I'll stay away from you. Now, so then I said, well, what is the nuclear cores that are unstable? Why would those go? What's going on in there? And I know what happened in these nuclear cores that are unstable is that they originally were stable. They had their 8s and everybody was happy and they're all staying away from each other and having a good time, and all of a sudden somebody sets off an atomic bomb. And these are part of that atomic bomb, or very close. So what happens is they force each other into everybody else's regions. They make just a glob of a mess in here. Now, you're not going to necessarily force 60 or 70 different protons into one that only wants 20. But you're going to break them up into a point where they're going to have extra extra protons. I believe this is what happens. They have extra positives and negatives crushed into this mix. So now these don't settle in. They get to be like we see a second ago as it's setting up. It's right in here. Okay, so now this is, let's say, one extra electron in here, and they're all saying, "Get out of here! This is just a mess. Come on, get this guy out of here." And then all of a sudden they pop him out, and they lock into their frequency. So boom, here we come. Throw him out of here. Boom, he's gone. All right, we're good to go. All right, so you go to the next frequency, you get the same thing. As it settles in, they all start to jiggle themselves into the correct positions. I believe these are nuclear cores. I believe what you're looking at here is virtually what is in the nucleus of an atom. And they're surrounded by particles to try to invade that nucleus. You got your eights going out of your ears here. I mean, it's just the way it works. It needs some investigation by somebody that has more abilities than I have. But look at this. This is the one that gets me. Because now you've got a totally different pattern on one side as the other. Now, I don't know if this is just off tilt by a hair or something, but it's pretty interesting. This sure looks like a lot more of a wave than down here. Now, why? I don't know. Is it because of these wires coming under there? Who knows? Anyway, it needs. I believe this is our pattern that we're looking for in the patterns that keep everybody in their own regions. And we saw that in my light experiments showing those, what probably are Higgs fields, those round disks. Let's look at them once more time. They're patterns of polarized particles that are in their resonance frequencies. Okay, I'm going to go kind of quick because this is taking a little long. I guess it takes over a half an hour to rewrite nuclear physics. Now, do you see these particles here? Those little white dots are the ether. Those are the extra free-floating electrons that are in our atmosphere, and they're also in the atmosphere of the vacuum of space because they're emitted from the sun as these free-floating electron-type particles. They come through space and impact with us. I've shown this in you have to watch some other videos. Now, that's just the light disk flowing through. Now we get to the venturi, which is the accelerator over here. Two drums. It smashes in there with the airplane wing effect, creates a venturi. The particles here are seen concussing. That's the only particle that comes out of a red laser. This is all the effect of just like a jet fighter going through the breaking the sound barrier. Now, this is stretching. Remember, it was just like this. We're having a nice time going through. Well, now it's being pulled and stretched to have to accelerate to get through this venturi, which turns it into plasma. There's a lot more to be talking about plasma because that is the source of fusion. And if this was done in a vacuum and these were heavy particles, there is a possibility to create fusion with a passive plasma maker. Now, let's look at what else we have. You see these little white dots here? Those little tiny dots? Those are the ether particles that are in space, and they are the free-floating electrons. What they are doing now is they are reacting to this reverse magnetic field, which is enormous. You see it back here? That's enormous reverse because that is the interaction of this extreme excitation. So how do we know this? These little particles are concussing now. These are these light particles. They have they're the static. You walk through the air and they collect on you because when you are an attractive source to them, and then they will collect on you. But their ultimate goal is to get to ground. So when they collect on you, and there is enough of them, they will exceed the resistance value of the Earth, and they will exceed that, and they will be incorporated into the Earth as electrons that are absorbed into the Earth. And you hold a wire down next to the Earth, it'll go in the Earth. That is the nature of electricity. The Earth is a positive source. These are negative. net negative, they also have positives in them, and I show this in my research as well. Now, that is accelerated light. That is our ether. These are the particles. Those little white dots are the particles. All right, this over here to the right is the interference patterns, and that's created not from waves, that's created from get away from me reaction to all these negative particles being crushed into each other's zones that they don't want anybody in. So they force them all away, and they create these lines of the interference patterns as a reaction to the negative particles stripping away from each other, setting up lines of interference. It's very simple, it's very obvious. And that's the Cherenkov, that's the Higgs bosons, the boson filaments, which is the charged particle moving at extremely high impact speed, and that is when it impacts. And it happens very shortly after it exits the accelerator. This one appears to be spinning backwards. It could actually be antimatter, because if it emanated from the same source, which it did, it should be the same size particle, which I believe it is. If it has no magnetic field, it is spinning backwards and highly excited into its own self. So instead of spinning with a right-hand rule, setting up polarity, it's spinning with a left hand, and it is dragging its field back into itself. That's all I can say. And then it does this. Right, that's that particle. These are the fields. The electron that creates these fields is within inside that field, in its very, very center. You can't see it. This one here is that highly excited white reverse spinning particle. That's what I believe. It's creating its own field after crashing into a field and shooting out this little tiny field. That's what it looks like to me. These are the particles shortly after the acceleration. They come out here, and those are the particles that are seen. And they happen in red and green. So they are both positive and negative. There's power there and no power there. That is quite obvious. Positive is dark. The dark and the light show that there's energy and no energy. Okay, sum it up and go over my theory one more time. I say that light is nothing more than particles, and they are called electron flooding, and electron flood variables no longer have neutrons. They have particles, which are electrons, that flood the core and create stability in the core. When it doesn't have the correct number in the core, you don't get the correct resonance frequencies, and then you get instability. The core begins to disintegrate and throw these particles out, and that is your nuclear breakdown. The problem that they look at and they say, "Oh, there's a nuclear fallout." Well, it's not. It is nuclear fallout, but it has nothing to do with neutrons. It is the electrons have too many electrons in there, or possibly an extra proton, and they claim there's too many neutrons. Well, what it does is it becomes unstable. As you could see, the resonance frequency has to be exact, which means the number of electrons has to be exact. If it's not, you're going to be in an unstable condition. It's as simple as that. Now, here's what I'm claiming. Electron flood is the truth of the matter. There is no neutrons, so the core is flooded. It's loaded with these electrons until it achieves neutrality, and then a smidge more, and then they collect around, as you saw even with the toy magnet. Now, so what does that give us for variables? We have a particle size, which is the mass, and everything there is has a mass. There's nothing that is just electromagnetic wave massless. That was not correct by Einstein. So, and then you have a spin of it. We could see that the spin, and it can go plus or minus. I've shown that over and over. The speed of the particle is variable. I've shown that over and over and over. The density of the media penetrated is obvious. You have thicker, atmosphere and lighter atmosphere in the different areas in the, layers of the atmosphere, and the height it has different thicknesses, and that is the ether. And in that ether is the free-floating electrons that I've been talking about over and over and over. They're in space. They come from the sun. They are from every single luminous body sends them out. They're all floating in space. Those are the things that we're scrubbing against, the negative particles, because everything in the whole universe is negative on its surface if it's complete matter, and it has atoms which are coated with negative orbitals, and then they make molecules, they're coated with negatives, so everything is painted with a negative surface. It goes flying through the air, which is loaded with extra negatives, the ether. It creates resistance, it spins to the right, it creates the curveball a guy throws in a baseball. If you throw with a left-hand spin, it's a crazy ball, it goes insane. And the left-hand pitchers are throwing some really insane balls. They're going totally wacky. Now, we take all of these variables, we have a new equation. Energy no longer is just mass equals the speed of light squared, because Einstein said there was no mass, so mass times energy would have, light would have no energy. Because light has no mass, he said. So energy means no energy, no mass, no energy. That was his own equation. But we know that there is nothing that doesn't have mass. That is anything. It doesn't have any mass, it's nothing. So, get right away from that. Now, and neutrons get away from that. So, now, here's we got energy equals mass, which is the weight. So that's part of the impact power, times the spin, and the spin is how fast it's spinning, gives it more drill power. So how fast it's going forward, how much it weighs, how much fast it's spinning around a circle, times the speed it's going forward. Then you have to account for the density of the mass that it's impacting into, and the movement that you are moving in relation to the mass. You are moving in relation to the ether, actually. So it's the motion of the media penetrated through the space. Now, if this is correct, which it is, we right now are lost in space. We are literally lost in space. We thought that, the whole thing was, we know it's because of the speed of light, things are slowing down, and then all of a sudden everything's speeding up, and now it's going so fast it's exceeded the speed of light, which is not allowed. So it's very turned into absolute nonsense, and they continue to stand behind this nonsense instead of thinking, let's think about it a little different. Because it's totally different. So at this point, we thought everything going this way, trying to get away from us, and that's why it shifted red. No, it's slowing down, obviously. The stuff coming from the left of us is slowing down. The stuff coming from the right is slowing down. The stuff coming from behind us is slowing down. Light is slowing down. Simple as that. It's not redshifted. So, what does that say? That means that we have a zero idea how far away anything is, because not only will it shift, it will shift variably. If it's denser in this region, it will be more attracted to that region, and we will see more of a redshift. If it's thinner over here, it will come at its standard speed. We will see hardly any redshift. So we'll think that one there is closer, this one here, or whatever, based on these guesses that were wrong. So right now, we're lost in space, literally lost in space. And that's just one way. There's one last thing to point out about my theory here. All that stands true, but also I want you to know that protons are only half the charge that they say they are. And I can prove that. If my theory is correct, it means that hydrogen itself has a positive and negative charge in the core and has one electron hanging around outside. It doesn't have one single big proton in the core. It never would, because it would attract that single negative into it and slam into itself. They have come up with all kinds of crazy, spooky, entangled this and that, and it's all nonsense. So this says that in the core of a hydrogen, you have at least half of that is positive and the other half is negative. And if you look up the nuclear, the atomic weights of these things, you're going to find out that they don't add up to the things that they say they should add up to. And it's because there is more mass in that core, because it has the negatives exceed the positives in mass. That's just what it is. The neutrons exceeded the protons in mass, but they're not neutrons. They're negatives. That's what they missed. They're just negative, and somebody decided they were neutral for some reason. It's just nonsense.